In a matter of seconds, 30 sword strikes brought the reign of the living god to an end. But before he became the tyrant waiting to be insidiously murdered in a dark corridor,
he was the beloved heir everyone adored. How did Rome allow this to happen?
In the year 40 AD, the most powerful army on Earth stood on the cold shores of the English Channel. 20,000 battle-hardened Roman soldiers ready to conquer the edges of the known world. But as they drew their swords, there was no invading army before them. They were simply staring at the sea. Their 28-year-old emperor, Caligula, who had declared himself a living god, rode his horse to the front lines, pointed his sword at the ocean, and screamed a single command: charge. He ordered his legions to stab the ocean. He had declared war on Neptune, the god of the seas. And what happened when the battle was over? He made his soldiers collect seashells as spoils of war. Yes, the rulers of one of the greatest empires in human history were collecting seashells because their leader had officially lost his mind. But this wasn't just an unusual moment of madness. This was the climax of a terrifying psychological decay. Today, we step inside the mind of Rome's most notorious ruler. How did a beloved young prince turn into the ultimate symbol of brutality? And what happens when you give absolute, unchecked power to a madman? Long before he turned into a monster, he was just a little boy named Gaius. He was the son of Germanicus, Rome's most beloved military hero. Gaius grew up in military camps, wearing a tiny, custom-made soldier's uniform and little leather boots. The tough legionaries found this adorable and nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boots. He hated this nickname. Yet, world history would never allow him to forget it. Caligula's childhood was no fairy tale. It was a total horror movie. His father was mysteriously poisoned. His mother and brothers were starved to death in dark dungeons by the paranoid Emperor Tiberius. Caligula survived only by wearing a mask of absolute submission. He was forced to live on the island of Capri with Tiberius, the very man who slaughtered his family. He smiled, he served, and he hid his rage. As one Roman historian wrote, "Never was there a better slave or a worse master." When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, Rome rejoiced. 24-year-old Caligula took possession of the throne. The empire was ecstatic. He was young, handsome, and generous. He doubled the pay of the soldiers, burned Tiberius's treason files, and hosted massive gladiatorial games. For the first 6 months, it was a golden age. But then, a ruthless fever came knocking on his door. In the autumn of his first year, Caligula fell terminally ill. He managed to survive, but the man who rose from that bed was no longer Little Boots. It was as if his mind had been completely rewired. Some historians believe the fever caused permanent brain damage. Others believe that the sudden acquisition of absolute power simply shattered his young mind. In either case, Caligula decided he was no longer a mortal. He was a living god. And right after that moment, things started getting weird. To understand the depth of his transformation, one must look at how he treated his own family. In Rome, the imperial family was sacred. But Caligula took this to a terrifying extreme. He began to treat his 3 sisters, Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and Agrippina, not as siblings, but as wives. Drusilla, in particular, was his favorite. He loved her with an obsession that shocked even the most decadent Roman senators. When Drusilla died of a sudden illness in 38 AD, Caligula's grief was monstrous. He declared a period of universal mourning across the empire. During this time, it was a capital crime to laugh, to take a bath, or to have dinner with one's family. To mourn Drusilla was mandatory. but to mourn her incorrectly meant death. He had lost his only anchor to humanity, and now there was nothing left to hold back his darkest impulses. Caligula began wandering around his palace dressed as Hercules, Apollo, and even Venus. He ordered the heads of Greece's most beautiful statues to be chopped off and replaced with his own bust. He would talk to the statue of Jupiter, whispering secrets, and sometimes even arguing with it. But his greatest disrespect was saved directly for the Roman Senate. He appointed his favorite racehorse, Incitatus, to the office of consul, the highest political office in Rome. He had a marble stable and an ivory collar made for the horse, and even established a dedicated army of slaves to serve it in purple robes. To a modern eye, making a horse a senator might seem like pure madness. But there was a much darker, calculated psychological and political game at play. Caligula didn't do this because he loved his horse. He did it to humiliate the Senate. He was telling the most powerful politicians in the world, "My horse can do your job better than you." Under his rule, Rome's massive treasury was drained in less than 2 years on mega projects, floating luxury palace ships, and sheer extravagance. His madness was not just psychological, it was physical and architectural. He ordered the construction of 2 massive ships on Lake Nemi, yachts that were essentially floating palaces. These ships were made of cedar wood, adorned with marble, mosaic floors, heated baths, and even fruit orchards. He used them to host wild, drunken parties that lasted for days, draining the Roman treasury with every single wave. But his most expensive tantrum was the Bridge of Baiae. A famous astrologer had once predicted that Caligula had as much chance of becoming emperor as he did of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. To prove a dead astrologer wrong, Caligula gathered thousands of merchant ships, anchored them in a double row across the 3-mile bay, covered them with dirt, and built a paved road on top of the sea. He then put on the breastplate of Alexander the Great, mounted his horse, and rode triumphantly across the water. It was a massive spectacle of ego, but it paralyzed Rome's grain supply, pushing the city to the brink of starvation just for a 3-day parade. When the money ran out, the terror began. He forced wealthy Romans to write him into their wills, and then ordered them to commit suicide. You cannot rule an empire through fear and humiliation forever.
As the treasury emptied, Caligula's cruelty became a daily spectator sport. At the gladiatorial games, if there was a shortage of criminals to be executed, he would order his guards to throw random spectators from the crowd into the arena to be eaten by wild beasts, just to keep the show going. He took pleasure in watching the execution of high-ranking citizens, often forcing their parents to watch the torture of their sons and then dine with him afterward, forcing them to laugh and joke. Even his own elite soldiers, the Praetorian Guard, were not safe. He would constantly humiliate them, giving them embarrassing daily passwords and mocking them in front of the entire court. He believed he was untouchable. He believed the gods would protect him. But in Rome, the gods only favored those who could keep their soldiers loyal.
On January 24th, 41 AD, during a theatrical festival, Caligula was walking down a secluded corridor in the palace. Waiting for him in the shadows was someone Caligula had mocked and insulted for years, Cassius Chaerea, a captain of his own Praetorian Guard. Cassius drew his sword. In a matter of seconds, 30 sword strikes brought the reign of the living god to an end. Caligula was only 28 years old. He ruled for just 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. Yet those 3 years changed Rome's political DNA forever. The Senate believed that by killing the madman, they could bring back the Republic. But they were wrong. The army marched directly into the palace, found Caligula's uncle hiding behind a curtain, and declared him the next emperor. Rome was no longer a state ruled by laws, but an empire ruled by the power of the sword. Caligula was dead, but the madness of power was just beginning. Which leads us to a bigger question. Was Caligula's madness just an exception? Or was the Roman system destined to produce monsters all along? And what was the true point of no return for this crumbling empire? Click on the video appearing on your screen right now to find out.